A wealthy man left his safe wide open, not because he forgot, but because he wanted to test the one person he thought he could trust. What he didn't expect was how her reaction would change everything. What started as a quiet job for a humble Australian housekeeper turned into a life-altering moment neither of them saw coming. Secrets were revealed, values tested, and what unfolded in that mansion would rewrite their past and their future. This is a story about integrity, healing, and the quiet power of human connection. Stay with us. This story might just touch your heart. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Hawthorne, a wealthy suburb on Melbourne's east side, as Elodie Barnes stepped off the tram. Her worn leather boots tapped against the pavement, each step measured and deliberate. At 27, Elodie carried herself with the careful poise of someone who had learned early that the world rarely offered second chances. The street before her was lined with jacaranda trees, their purple blossoms carpeting the sidewalk in royal splendor. Beyond them stood imposing Victorian mansions, testaments to old money and quiet power. Her destination, the Langston estate, waited at the end of the street, partially hidden behind wrought-iron gates and a stone wall covered in climbing roses. Elodie adjusted the strap of her canvas bag, straightened her simple blouse, and took a deep breath. The job advertisement had been specific. Live-in housekeeper, no experience necessary, discretion paramount. The salary was generous enough to make her hands tremble when she'd read the figure. It was enough to save her family's struggling bookshop back in Daylesford, a small town 2 hours northwest of Melbourne, where 3 generations of Barnes had sold stories and dreams until the economic downturn had threatened everything. "Just be yourself," her mother had said over their last video call. "You've always had good instincts about people." Good instincts hadn't saved them from the mounting bills, though. Good instincts wouldn't keep the bank from foreclosing on the shop in 6 weeks' time unless they found $38,000. Elodie had calculated that she could save nearly that much in 4 months with this position, if she was careful with every dollar. The intercom beside the gate crackled to life before she could press the button. "Ms. Barnes," a crisp female voice inquired. "Yes, I'm here for the housekeeper position," Elodie replied, wondering if she was being watched. The gate slid open silently, revealing a circular driveway that curved around a marble fountain. The mansion itself was a magnificent blend of modern and colonial architecture, glass and steel embraced by sandstone, with wide verandas and French doors opening onto manicured gardens. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair and impeccable posture waited at the entrance. "I'm Margaret Chen, Mr. Langston's personal assistant," she said, offering a firm handshake. "He doesn't meet new staff immediately. You'll be dealing primarily with me until you've proven yourself." "I understand," Elodie nodded. "Mr. Langston values his privacy above all else," Margaret continued. As they entered a foyer with soaring ceilings and a crystal chandelier that cast rainbow prisms across polished marble floors. "He rarely leaves the East Wing, where his quarters are located. You'll be responsible for maintaining the rest of the house, preparing simple meals when the chef is off, and ensuring everything runs smoothly." As Margaret led her through the mansion, Elodie noted the absence of personal photographs. Instead, the walls displayed museum-quality paintings, Australian landscapes, Aboriginal art, and contemporary pieces that likely cost more than her family's entire shop. The rooms were immaculate, but had an unlived-in quality, as though designed to impress rather than comfort. "Your quarters are here," Margaret said, opening a door to reveal a suite larger than Elodie's entire apartment. A 4-poster bed stood opposite floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden pond. "The staff entrance is through the kitchen. Your schedule will be on your tablet each morning. Any questions?" Elodie hesitated, then asked, "Is there a particular way Mr. Langston prefers the library books to be cleaned?" Something shifted in Margaret's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. "Dust them individually, return them exactly to their place, and never use water or chemicals. The leather-bound volumes require special care. I'll show you tomorrow." "Thank you." After Margaret left, Elodie unpacked her few belongings, changed into fresh clothes, and explored her new living space. The bathroom was stocked with expensive toiletries. The closet held 3 sets of simple black and white uniforms in her exact size, and on the nightstand sat a tablet with detailed house plans and schedules. As night fell, she stood by the window, watching the garden lights illuminate the sculpted hedges and stone pathways. Somewhere in this enormous house was a man she'd never met, a man wealthy enough to employ an invisible army of staff, yet reportedly reclusive to the point of eccentricity. Edward Langston. The name had seemed vaguely familiar when she'd applied for the position, but she couldn't place why. His company, Langston Technologies, had revolutionized sustainable energy storage before he'd sold it for billions 5 years ago. Since then, he'd withdrawn from public life, becoming something of an urban legend in Melbourne's business circles. Elodie's phone vibrated with a text from her mother. "All settled in. Shop's quiet today, missing you already." She typed back, "All good. Beautiful place. We'll call tomorrow. Love you, X." What she didn't share was how the vastness of the mansion made her feel smaller than she already was, or how the weight of responsibility, of being her family's last hope, pressed against her chest like a stone. Tomorrow, she would begin earning her keep. Tomorrow she would start saving her family's legacy. Tonight she would memorize every detail of the house plans, prepare for every contingency, and leave nothing to chance. Unknown to Elodie, in a darkened room filled with glowing monitors, Edward Langston watched her silhouette against the window. His fingers tapped thoughtfully against the arm of his wheelchair as he studied her, this woman who had asked about his books before her own comforts. "Interesting," he murmured to himself. "Let's see what you're made of, Ms. Barnes." At precisely 5:30 the next morning, Elodie woke to the gentle chime of her tablet alarm. Outside, the Australian dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. She dressed quickly in her new uniform, charcoal trousers and a crisp, white button-down shirt, and tied her chestnut hair into a neat bun. The house was still in pre-dawn silence as she made her way to the kitchen, where the schedule indicated she should prepare Mr. Langston's morning coffee. The kitchen itself was a chef's dream. Gleaming stainless steel appliances, marble countertops, and copper pots hanging from a rack above a massive island. A note on the coffee. Machine read, "Black, no sugar, ceramic cup, not too hot." Tray on counter with the Age newspaper. Deliver to East Wing study at 6 sharp. Elodie worked methodically, brewing the coffee with care, folding the newspaper precisely, arranging everything on a silver tray. At 5:55 she began the walk to the East Wing, navigating the mansion's corridors like a map she'd memorized. The East Wing had a different energy, more lived in, yet somehow more guarded. The artwork here was more personal, scientific diagrams, patents framed like achievements, and oddly, children's drawings preserved behind glass. She paused at the study door, balancing the tray with one hand to knock softly with the other. "Enter." The voice was deep, measured, with the slight rasp of someone who rarely used it. Elodie stepped into a room dominated by windows overlooking the bay. Morning light streamed across polished hardwood floors, illuminating bookshelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. In the center, not behind a desk as she'd expected, but seated in a wheelchair beside a chess table, was Edward Langston. He was younger than she'd imagined, early 60s perhaps, with silver hair cropped close to his head and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes, startlingly blue against tanned skin, watched her with analytical precision. "Good morning, Mr. Langston," she said, maintaining eye contact as she placed the tray on the table beside him. "Your coffee and newspaper, sir." He didn't respond immediately, just nodded once. Then, "You're punctual, Miss Barnes." "Yes, sir." "You've reviewed the house plans?" "Yes, sir, in detail." He picked up the coffee cup, took a careful sip, and nodded again. "Acceptable. Margaret will direct you today. Tomorrow you begin working independently." "I understand." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "One moment. Tell me, why did you apply for this position?" Elodie hesitated. "The salary is generous, sir." His expression remained impassive. "And I prefer working in quiet environments where attention to detail is valued." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "Very diplomatic. That will be all for now." The day passed in a blur of instructions and tasks. Margaret was thorough but fair, demonstrating everything once and expecting perfection thereafter. By evening, Elodie's hands were raw from cleaning, her feet ached from walking the endless corridors, and her mind buzzed with protocols and preferences. "You did well today," Margaret said, as they finished dinner inventory in the pantry. "Better than the last 3 who tried." "Thank you. I appreciate the guidance." Margaret studied her for a moment. "He'll test you, you know, Mr. Langston. He tests everyone." "Tests? How?" "Differently each time. Sometimes it's a deliberate mess to see how you handle unexpected situations. Sometimes it's contradictory instructions to see if you'll question authority. Sometimes she trailed off, then shook her head. Just be honest. That's all I can say. That night, exhausted but satisfied with her first day, Elodie called her mother. The house is enormous, Mum, like something from a film. The owner is intense, but the work is straightforward enough. Are they treating you well? Her mother's voice carried the worry she was trying to hide. Yes, very professionally. How's the shop? A pause. We've had better days. The bank called again. Elodie's throat tightened. I'll have my first paycheck in 2 weeks. It'll help. Don't worry about us, love. We've faced worse. But they both knew. That wasn't true. The bookshop was more than a business. It was their heritage, their home above the store where Elodie had grown up surrounded by stories and possibilities. After saying goodnight, Elodie checked her tablet one last time for the next day's schedule. There was a single task listed for 7 a.m. East Wing, dust library shelves. The next morning arrived with a gentle rainfall that drummed against the windows. Elodie prepared Mr. Langston's coffee as before, delivered it with the same quiet efficiency, and received another silent nod of acknowledgement. At 7 kwangs, armed with special dusting cloths and gloves, she returned to the East Wing. The corridor was silent except for the rain outside and the soft ticking of an antique grandfather clock. As she approached the library, something caught her eye. A door slightly ajar that hadn't been opened the day before. The room beyond was dark, but she could make out the gleam of metal. Elodie paused. This wasn't the library. According to the house plans, this was Mr. Langston's private office, strictly off limits. The door opened wider as she stood there, revealing what lay inside. A massive safe, its heavy door swung open to reveal shelves of gold bars, jewelry boxes and stacks of cash. And there, on a small table just beside the open safe, lay a slip of paper with a series of numbers written in bold black ink. Elodie's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked up and down the empty corridor, then back at the open safe. This had to be a mistake, or, Margaret's words echoed in her mind, a test. For several heartbeats, Elodie stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes fixed on the open safe. The stacks of $100 bills were arranged with mathematical precision. Gold bars gleamed under the faint light seeping through partially drawn curtains, and antique jewelry sparkled from velvet-lined boxes. A king's ransom, enough to save her family's bookshop 10 times over, lay exposed and vulnerable. The access code on the slip of paper seemed to pulse with possibility. She could memorize it, close the safe, and no one would know she'd seen it. Or she could... No. She wouldn't allow herself to complete that thought. Elodie stepped back from the doorway, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her phone. The familiar weight of it anchored her to reality, to the person she was raised to be. 3. Generations of Barnes had built their reputation on honesty and integrity in a small town where your word was everything. She dialed Margaret's number, watching the corridor anxiously as it rang. Ms. Chen speaking. Margaret, it's Elodie Barnes. She kept her voice low, professional. I'm in the East Wing and there's something you should know. Mr. Langston's safe is open. I was heading to the library as scheduled, but the office door was ajar and I could see inside. A long silence followed. Then, I see. Did you enter the room? No, I'm standing in the hallway. Should I close the door and continue with my duties, or should I wait here? Wait there. I'll inform Mr. Langston immediately. The call ended, leaving Elodie alone with the quiet tick of the grandfather clock and the soft patter of rain against the windows. 5 minutes passed. 10. She stood perfectly still, focusing on her breathing, trying not to look at the open safe or think about what its contents could mean for her family. Her phone vibrated. An incoming call from a number she recognized instantly. Mum, she answered, her voice softer now. Everything all right? Not exactly, love. Her mother's voice had that forced steadiness that always preceded bad news. The bank manager came by this morning. They've moved up the timeline. We have 30 days now, not 6 weeks. Elodie's stomach clenched. What? They can't do that. Apparently they can. Something about reassessing the property value and loan terms. A shaky breath. We need at least $38,000 by the end of the month, or we lose everything. The exact amount flickered through Elodie's mind like a neon sign. $38,000, probably less than what was in just one of those cash stacks in the safe. Her gaze drifted back to the open door, the gleaming treasures beyond. "Elodie? Are you still there?" She swallowed hard. "Yes, I'm here. Listen, Mum, I'm at work right now. Can I call you back tonight? We'll figure something out, I promise." After hanging up, Elodie found herself taking a step toward the open door. Just one step, then another. The weight of family obligation pulled at her like gravity, while the voice of conscience held her back. Standing in the doorway now, she could see more clearly. The safe was enormous, a walk-in vault with reinforced walls and a sophisticated locking mechanism. The door was heavy, steel probably worth more than her entire wardrobe. Inside, beyond the obvious valuables, were folders labeled with years, a collection of vintage watches and framed photographs she couldn't quite make out. The code on the paper called to her. 6 digits that could change everything. With shaking fingers, she reached out, not for the money or jewels, but for the safe door itself. She pushed it, feeling the substantial weight as it began to swing closed. Before it shut completely, she punched in a random 6-digit code on the keypad, hearing the satisfying click as the bolts engaged. Next, she carefully folded the real access code and tucked it into her pocket for safekeeping. Whatever test this was, she would not fail her own moral standards. The tears came then, silent but unstoppable. Not from regret, but from the weight of choosing right when wrong would have been so much easier. She slid down against the wall opposite the now closed safe, her knees pulled to her chest, and allowed herself this one moment of weakness. For nearly 2 hours, Elodie remained there, a silent guardian before the locked vault. She used the time to compose herself, to remind herself of who she was, and what she stood for. By the time footsteps echoed down the corridor, her tears had dried and her resolve had hardened. Edward Langston approached slowly, his wheelchair motorized but moving at a deliberate pace. Margaret walked beside him, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Barnes," Edward said, his voice revealing nothing, "I understand you found my safe open." Elodie stood, smoothing her uniform. "Yes, sir. I noticed it while on my way to dust the library. I didn't enter the room, but I could see the safe was open from the doorway. And yet the safe is now closed." She nodded, retrieving the folded paper from her pocket. "I thought it best to secure it, sir. I didn't look at anything inside beyond what was visible from the door. The access code was on this paper. I've kept it." "Safe for you." Edward wheeled closer, taking the paper from her outstretched hand. His blue eyes studied her face with the intensity of someone accustomed to finding lies. "You locked a safe containing millions of dollars worth of valuables, when you could have easily helped yourself to some of it. Why?" "Because it wasn't mine to take," she answered simply, "even though no one would have known." "I would have known, Mr. Langston." A silence stretched between them, filled only by the rain outside and the ticking clock. Finally, Edward nodded to Margaret, who produced a small key and unlocked a compartment in the arm of his wheelchair. From it, he withdrew an envelope. "You stayed," he said softly, echoing her earlier vigil. "You protected my property. It was the right thing to do." "Indeed." He held out the envelope. "This is for you." Elodie hesitated before accepting it. Inside was a check made out to her name for $50,000. Her breath caught, her fingers trembling against the paper. "I don't understand." "Consider it a bonus for passing the test." Her eyes widened. "You left it open on purpose." Edward's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I've learned the hard way. That trust must be earned, Miss Barnes. Every person who works closely with me undergoes a similar evaluation." Elodie looked down at the check, then back at her employer. Slowly, deliberately, she folded it and extended it back toward him. "I appreciate the gesture, Mr. Langston, but I can't accept this. Doing the right thing shouldn't come with a reward. I did it because I had to, because it's who I am." Something flickered in Edward's eyes, surprise perhaps, or a deeper emotion she couldn't name. "You're refusing $50,000? "Yes, sir, I am." Margaret's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing astonishment. "Very well," Edward said, taking back the check. "You may return to your duties, Miss Barnes. The library still needs dusting." As she turned to go, his voice stopped her once more. "One question, if you don't mind. Your family owns a bookshop in Dalesford, correct? Barnes and Daughters." Elodie's heart skipped. "Yes, how did you know that?" "I make it my business to know who works in my home. I understand the shop is experiencing financial difficulties." Heat rushed to her face. "That's personal, sir." Of course, my apologies for the intrusion. He wheeled back. Slightly. You may go. For the remainder of the day, Elodie worked mechanically, her mind replaying the morning's events. By evening, exhaustion had settled into her bones, but sleep eluded her. She sat on her bed, phone in hand, unable to call her mother with the news that she'd turned down enough money to save their shop. A soft knock at her door startled her. Margaret stood in the hallway, holding a leather-bound book. "Mr. Langston asked me to bring you this," she said, extending the volume. "He thought you might appreciate it." The book was a first edition of The Secret Garden, one of Elodie's childhood favorites. "Open it," Margaret suggested. Inside the cover was a handwritten note. "Integrity like a garden requires constant tending. Meet me in the library tomorrow at 8 p.m. E.L." The library in the East Wing was unlike any room Elodie had ever entered. 3 stories tall with a spiral staircase connecting each level, it housed thousands of volumes ranging from rare first editions to contemporary bestsellers. The scent of leather, paper, and lemon polish created an atmosphere of reverence. At precisely 8 p.m., Elodie arrived wearing her uniform, though her workday had officially ended. Edward was already there, positioned near a fireplace where flames danced behind a glass screen. The warm light softened his features, making him appear less formidable than he had that morning. "Thank you for coming, Miss Barnes," he said, gesturing to an armchair opposite his wheelchair. "Please sit." She perched on the edge of the seat, hands folded in her lap. "Thank you for the book, Mr. Langston. It's beautiful." "It was my late wife's favorite," he replied, his voice carrying a note of melancholy. Catherine had a particular fondness for stories about secret places and hidden strength. The mention of his wife, a subject notably absent from her briefing materials, surprised Elodie. "I didn't realize you were married, sir. For 22 years. She passed away 5 years ago." He adjusted his position in the wheelchair. "Cancer, quite aggressive. She was gone within months of the diagnosis." "I'm very sorry." Edward nodded his acknowledgement, then changed the subject. "Tell me about your family's bookshop." Elodie hesitated, unsure how personal to be with her employer. "It's been in our family for 3 generations. My grandmother started it in 1952. My mother runs it now, and I was helping until recently. Until financial troubles forced you to seek more lucrative employment," he finished for her. She met his gaze directly. "Yes." "How much do you need to save it?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. "Mr. Langston, I'm not offering charity, Ms. Barnes. I'm gathering information." "How much?" $38,000 by the end of the month, she admitted. The bank moved up their timeline. Edward's fingers tapped thoughtfully against the arm of his wheelchair. "And that's why you were upset after locking the safe. Your mother called with bad news." Realization dawned on her. "You were watching me. This house has an extensive security system. I observe everyone who works here, especially in restricted areas." Anger flashed through her, quickly tempered by the understanding that this was his home, his rules. "Yes, my mother called. But that doesn't change anything. I wouldn't have taken your money regardless of our situation." "I believe you." His blue eyes held hers with unexpected warmth. "That's why I've asked you here tonight. I have a proposition for you." He wheeled over to a desk and retrieved a folder, which he handed to her. Inside were documents detailing the Langston Trust Foundation, a philanthropic organization with assets in the millions but dormant operations. "After Catherine died, I lost interest in many things, including the foundation we started together. It's been minimally active for 5 years, managed by accountants rather than people with vision." He paused, watching her reaction. "I'd like you to take over as its director." Elodie nearly dropped the folder. What? Sir, I have no experience in philanthropy or—" "You have the one quality I value above all others: integrity. The foundation needs someone who won't be corrupted by access to significant resources, someone who understands the value of doing right, regardless of personal cost." He leaned forward slightly. "The position comes with a substantial salary increase and, more importantly, the ability to make a real difference. But I'm just a housekeeper." "No," Edward said, his voice softening. "You're the only person who's ever passed my test so completely, not just by refusing to take what wasn't yours, but by refusing reward for your honesty." Elodie's mind raced. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a complete redirection of her life's path. "May I ask why you trust me so quickly? You've known me for 2 days." Edward's gaze shifted to the fireplace. Sometimes, Ms. Barnes, you recognize goodness immediately, the same way you recognize its opposite. I've encountered plenty of the latter in my time. He hesitated, then continued. There's something else you should... I know. Your family's bookshop. I'm familiar with it. 7 years ago, a children's hospital in Melbourne needed funding for a specialized surgical unit. The community held fundraisers, including a charity auction at Barnes and Daughters. Your mother donated rare books and raised substantial funds. Elodie nodded slowly. I remember. It was for a little girl who needed heart surgery. My cousin's daughter, actually. Exactly. The surgery was ultimately funded by an anonymous donor who covered the remaining costs. Edward's eyes met hers. I was that donor, Ms. Barnes. The revelation hit her like a physical force. You saved Lily's life? The surgeons saved her life. I merely provided resources. Elodie's throat tightened with emotion. She's 12 now. Plays netball. Wants to be a doctor someday. A genuine smile transformed Edward's face, erasing years of weariness. I'm glad to hear it. Is that why you hired me? Because of this connection? No. Your name caught my attention, certainly. But you were hired on your own merits. The test was real, as is this offer. Silence filled the room as Elodie processed everything. Finally, she asked, What about my family's shop? The Foundation's first official act could be a small business grant to a deserving bookstore in Daylesford. Not a loan, a grant, with stipulations about community service and literacy programs, of course. Hope bloomed in her chest, but caution tempered it. Why are you doing this? Edward wheeled back slightly, creating distance. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten, Ms. Barnes. You reminded me what it means to believe in someone, what it means to feel. The vulnerability in his admission shifted something between them. Not erasing the employer-employee boundary, but humanizing it. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll consider it. The Foundation needs you. And perhaps... He glanced around the vast library. This house could use someone who cares about more than just dusting the books. The following week passed in a blur of transitions. Elodie moved from her staff quarters to a more spacious suite in the main house, closer to the library that would become her office. Margaret provided her with a crash course in the Foundation's operations, while Edward arranged for her mother to visit. She should know what her daughter will be doing, he'd said simply. When Olivia Barnes arrived, her expression upon seeing the mansion cycled rapidly from awe to concern to pride. A petite woman with Elodie's same chestnut hair, now streaked with silver, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had weathered many storms. This is where you've been working? She asked, as they walked the gardens, Edward having tactfully given them space to talk privately. It's been unexpected, Elodie admitted. Mum, there's something you should know about Mr. Langston. As Elodie explained the connection, how Edward had been Lily's anonymous benefactor, how he now wanted to save their bookshop through a foundation grant, Olivia's eyes widened. All these years, I've wondered who that person was, she murmured. We sent thank you letters through the hospital, but they were never answered. He didn't do it for recognition, Elodie said. From what I understand, he rarely does. They rounded a bend in the path, coming upon a stone bench overlooking a koi pond. Sitting, Olivia took her daughter's hands. And this new position, are you certain about it? Running a charitable foundation is worlds away from what you studied at university. Elodie had earned her degree in literature, with a minor in business, always intending to take over the family shop someday. I know it's a sudden change, but it feels right, Mum. I can help more people this way, including us. Olivia's gaze grew searching. And Mr. Langston? What kind of man is he really? Complicated, Elodie answered honestly. Brilliant, certainly. Wounded, definitely. But I believe he's genuinely good, beneath all the layers of protection he's built around himself. Protection from what? Loss, I think. And betrayal. Elodie hesitated. His wife died 5 years ago. I get the impression he's been alone ever since by choice. Olivia nodded slowly. Grief can make hermits of the best of us. She squeezed Elodie's hands. Just promise me you'll be careful. Not just with the job, but with your heart. My heart. Mum, it's not like that. He's my employer. For now, Olivia said with maternal insight. But roles change. People change. Just remember who you are, no matter what happens. Later that afternoon, Edward joined them for tea on the veranda. Though initially formal, he gradually relaxed as Olivia shared stories of Elodie's childhood, her passion for books, her determination to master difficult skills, her fierce protection of underdogs. She once organized a reading festival for a classmate who couldn't afford school book fare purchases, Olivia recalled, convinced the whole class to bring books from home to exchange instead. Edward's eyes crinkled at the corners. That doesn't surprise me at all. When the conversation turned to the bookshop, his demeanor shifted to businesslike efficiency. The grant will be structured as follows, he explained. Initial funding of $50,000 for immediate debt clearance and building repairs, quarterly operational support for 2 years, contingent upon implementation of community literacy programs, an option for expansion funding. In year 3, should the business metrics support it? Olivia's eyes filled with tears. That's extraordinarily generous, Mr. Langston. It's an investment in cultural preservation, Mrs. Barnes. Independent bookshops are disappearing at an alarming rate. Yours has historical significance to the community. Elodie, watching him, recognized the deflection for what it was, discomfort with gratitude, a shield against emotional connection. Yet she also noted how his gaze lingered on her mother's joy, how his shoulders relaxed incrementally as the afternoon progressed. That evening, after Olivia had been shown to a guest room, Elodie found Edward in the library, reviewing foundation documents. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything you've done for my family." He looked up, blue eyes tired, but clear. "Your mother is remarkable. I see where you get your strength." "She liked you too, though she tried not to show it," Elodie smiled. "She thinks you're lonely." "Is that what she said?" "Not directly, but mothers have their ways of communicating concern." Edward's expression became guarded. "I'm not lonely, Miss Barnes. I'm selective about company." "Of course, sir." She turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. "Would tomorrow morning be a good time to discuss my first initiatives for the foundation?" "Yes, after breakfast." "And Elodie?" The use of her first name stopped her. "Yes? Outside of formal functions, there's no need for sir anymore. Edward will do." It was a small gesture, yet somehow monumental, a single step across the carefully maintained distance between them. "Good night, Edward," she said softly. "Good night, Elodie." 2 days later, with her mother safely returned to Daylesford and the first installment of grant funding already transferred to the bookshop's account, Elodie officially began her role as director of the Langston Trust Foundation. Her office, a converted reading room adjacent to the main library, became a hub of activity. She hired a small staff, an administrative assistant named Priya with experience in non-profit work, a financial analyst, James, who specialized in sustainable investment, and a community outreach coordinator, May, whose enthusiasm for social change was infectious. Edward observed these changes with measured approval, occasionally offering guidance but largely giving Elodie autonomy. Their morning meetings became a comfortable ritual, coffee and planning sessions where ideas flowed freely between them, professional boundaries still firmly in place, but a growing ease in their interactions. 6 weeks into her new position, Elodie presented her first major initiative, a rural literacy program targeting underserved communities throughout Victoria. The plan would convert decommissioned train carriages into mobile libraries that could travel to remote areas, bringing books, technology, and educational resources to children with limited access. "The initial investment is substantial," she acknowledged, as Edward reviewed the proposal, "but the long-term impact could be transformative." He studied the budget with a critical eye. "You've allocated funds for specialized staff training, but nothing for security. Systems to protect the equipment. I've arranged partnerships with local police departments. They'll provide security consultation in exchange for community engagement opportunities." Elodie pointed to a section he'd overlooked. "It's detailed in Appendix C." A smile tugged at Edward's lips. "Resourceful, I like it." He signed the approval form without further questions. "When do we launch?" 3 months if everything stays on schedule. We'll start with 2 carriages and expand based on results." Edward wheeled to the window, gazing out at the gardens below. "Catherine would have loved this project," he said quietly. "She always believed literacy was the foundation of opportunity." Elodie approached, standing beside his wheelchair. "Tell me about her?" For a moment she thought he might deflect the question as he had so many times before. Instead he spoke. "She was a primary school teacher when we met. Brilliant mind, extraordinary patience. She could connect with any child, find the key to unlock their potential." His voice softened with memory. We were complete opposites in many ways. She taught me to see beyond profit margins to the human element of success. She... Sounds wonderful. She was. Edward turned from the window. The foundation was her vision originally. I merely provided the funding. After she died, I couldn't bear to continue her work without her. Elodie heard the unspoken completion of his thought. Until now. I'll do my best to honor her vision, she promised. You already are. The train carriages arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Their exteriors weather-worn but structurally sound. Elodie stood on the platform at the private railway siding near the Langston estate, clipboard in hand, as workers began the transformation process. The first carriage would become the story wagon, filled with books for all ages. The second would house the digital den equipped with computers, tablets and educational software. What do you think? She asked, turning to Edward, who sat in his wheelchair beside her, bundled against the morning chill. I think they need work, he replied pragmatically, but I see the potential. Over the following weeks, that potential emerged as local artists painted vibrant murals on the exteriors. Scenes from beloved Australian children's books on one carriage and Aboriginal Dreamtime stories on the other. Inside, custom shelving, seating nooks and technology stations transformed the spaces into welcoming havens for learning. The project captured public attention, with local media covering the initiative. For the first time in years, Edward reluctantly agreed to an interview, though he insisted Elodie be the primary spokesperson. This is your vision now, he told her, as they prepared in the library the morning of the interview. I'm merely the financial backing. She shook her head. It's our vision. The foundation bears your name, and the public should see the man behind it. When the journalist, a thoughtful woman from the age, arrived, Edward surprised Elodie by speaking eloquently about the importance of rural education. He shared carefully selected stories about Catherine's passion for literacy and expressed genuine enthusiasm for the mobile library project. Ms. Barnes has revitalized our mission, he said, gesturing toward Elodie with unmistakable respect. Her understanding of community needs has given the foundation new purpose. The journalist seemed particularly interested in their working relationship. It's unusual for someone to transition from household staff to executive leadership so quickly, she observed. What qualities did you see in Ms. Barnes that prompted such trust? Edward's gaze met Elodie's briefly before he answered. Integrity is rare in today's world. When you find someone who embodies it completely, you don't let organizational hierarchies stand in the way of putting their talents to best use. The resulting article, published. The following week was thoughtful and positive. It focused primarily on the mobile library project, but included a sidebar about Edward's return to public philanthropy after years of seclusion. The photo accompanying the piece showed them together beside one of the train carriages, Edward in his wheelchair looking up at Elodie, who was gesturing toward the mural, her face animated with passion for the project. Olivia called the day the article was published. You look happy, she said after congratulating Elodie on the project. Happier than I've seen you in years. I am happy, Elodie realized. The work is challenging but fulfilling. And Mr. Langston? Her mother's tone carried a hint of something unspoken. The paper made it sound like you two work quite closely. We do. He's brilliant, Mum. Once you get past his defenses, he has incredible insights about how to make meaningful change. I see. A pause. The shop is doing well with the new programs, by the way. We've started a children's reading hour on Saturday mornings. Standing room only last week. That's wonderful. I've been meaning to visit, but with the mobile library launch, I understand, love. Your life is there now. No resentment colored her mother's voice, just acceptance. Just don't forget where you came from. Never, Elodie promised. The conversation lingered in her mind that evening as she worked late in her office, finalizing details for the launch event. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Edward entered carrying 2 mugs of tea. You missed dinner, he said, placing 1 mug on her desk. Margaret was concerned. I lost track of time. Elodie accepted the tea gratefully. Thank you. He positioned his wheelchair across from her desk. The article was well received. We've had donation inquiries from 3 major corporations since this morning. That's excellent news. She sipped her tea, perfectly prepared with just a touch of honey, exactly as she liked it. The realization that he'd noticed this preference warmed her as much as the beverage itself. You should take a few days off after the launch, he suggested. Visit your mother. See the improvements at the bookshop. There's so much to do here. The foundation won't collapse without you for a long weekend. A hint of humor softened his words. Besides, I've been thinking it might be good for me to visit Dalesford as well, see the results of our investment firsthand. Elodie nearly spilled her tea. You want to come with me? If that wouldn't be an imposition. It's been some time since I've travelled anywhere beyond Melbourne. 5 years, she calculated silently, since Catherine died. It wouldn't be an imposition at all, she assured him. Mum would be thrilled to show you the shop. Something shifted in Edward's expression. Uncertainty, perhaps, or vulnerability. I should warn you, I'm not particularly good at casual social interactions. Catherine handled that aspect of our life together. Dalesford is a small town with kind people, Elodie said gently. No one will expect you to be anything other than yourself. The day of the mobile library launch arrived with perfect early autumn weather, clear skies and gentle sunshine that gleamed off the freshly painted carriages. A crowd gathered at the Melbourne rail yard. Schoolchildren, teachers, community leaders, and media. Elodie, dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress, delivered a speech that highlighted the partnership between rural communities and the Langston Foundation. Edward, positioned nearby in a tailored suit that softened his usual austerity, watched her with undisguised admiration. When it came time to officially christen the carriages, he surprised everyone by adding unplanned remarks. My late wife believed that books could change lives, he said, his voice strong despite the emotion evident in his eyes. Today, thanks to the vision and determination of Elodie Barnes, that belief takes physical form. These carriages will carry not just books and computers, but possibilities, windows into worlds that might otherwise remain closed to young minds in isolated communities. A ripple of appreciation moved through the audience. When the ribbon was cut and the children surged forward to explore the carriages, Edward found himself unexpectedly surrounded by curious youngsters. Fascinated by his wheelchair, Elodie, watching from a few steps away, saw him tense initially, then gradually relax as he answered their straightforward questions. By the time a young girl climbed into his lap to reach a book on a high shelf, her mother mortified, Edward momentarily startled, he was handling the interaction with surprising grace. Sorry about that, Elodie said later as they watched. The first mobile library depart for its inaugural journey to the rural town of Marysville. Children can be wonderfully direct. It was refreshing, Edward admitted. No agenda, no pretense. Catherine always said children were the best judges of character. What was her verdict on you then? A genuine smile transformed his face. She said I was prickly but worth the effort. The journey to Dalesford the following weekend marked Edward's first overnight trip since his wife's death. Margaret fussed over preparations, packing his medications and arranging for a wheelchair-accessible vehicle. Though he dismissed her concerns with his typical briskness, Elodie noticed the tightness around his eyes, the way his fingers drummed against the armrest, signs of anxiety he tried to conceal. The drive through Victoria's countryside provided a natural buffer for conversation. Elodie pointed out landmarks and shared stories of her childhood visits to small towns similar to those they passed. Gradually, Edward's tension eased. Dalesford, with its mineral springs and historic buildings, welcomed them with mid-afternoon tranquility. Barnes and Daughters stood on the main street, its freshly painted facade and new sign a testament to the foundation's investment. Through the windows, Elodie could see her mother assisting a customer, shelves fully stocked with books arranged by genre and reading level. It looks vibrant, Edward observed. Not just surviving, but thriving. Inside, Olivia greeted them with warm professionalism, showing Edward the improvements while Elodie reacquainted herself with the shop's familiar scents and sounds. The upstairs apartment where she'd grown up had been partially converted into a children's reading room, with cushions, small chairs, and murals similar to those on the mobile library carriages. The Saturday morning program has been our biggest success, Olivia explained. We've partnered with the local primary school. Teachers assign books. Students read them here, and we've seen reading scores improve significantly this term. Exactly the kind of outcome we hoped for, Edward nodded approvingly. Sustainable impact, not just temporary relief. That evening, they dined at Olivia's favorite local restaurant, a farm-to-table establishment where the chef greeted her by name and accommodated Edward's wheelchair with unobtrusive efficiency. The conversation flowed naturally, covering books, community events, and gentle reminiscences about Elodie's childhood. She was always the serious one, Olivia recalled. Even as a little girl, such determination. When she decided to learn chess at 9 years old, she practiced until she could beat players 3 times her age. Edward raised an eyebrow at Elodie. Chess? You never mentioned you played. She shrugged, slightly embarrassed. I haven't in years. We should remedy that, he said. I play most evenings. Oh, you should definitely take him up on that, Olivia encouraged. She was quite brilliant at strategy games. Later, as they strolled and wheeled through Daylesford's peaceful evening streets, Olivia purposefully dropped back to admire a shop window, giving them a moment of privacy. Thank you for coming, Elodie said softly. I know this wasn't easy for you. Edward looked up at her, his face gentler in the streetlight's glow. It was time to step beyond the boundaries I've created for myself. Your mother is exactly as I imagined, the foundation of your strength. She likes you, Elodie confided. She rarely invites business associates to dinner. Is that all I am? He asked, his tone light but his eyes searching. A business associate? Before she could formulate a response, Olivia rejoined them, and the moment passed, leaving Elodie with questions that followed her into dreams that night. The chessboard between them gleamed in the library's soft lighting, its carved pieces standing like silent sentinels awaiting command. Edward had suggested their first game the evening after returning from Daylesford, and it had quickly become a weekly tradition. These matches revealed aspects of his personality that Elodie might never have glimpsed otherwise. His strategic brilliance, certainly, but also flashes of playfulness and an unexpected capacity for self-deprecation when she outmaneuvered him. Checkmate, Elodie announced. Sliding her queen into position with quiet confidence, Edward studied the board, eyebrows raised. 3 moves ahead. I didn't see that coming. You were too focused on your knight's advancement, she explained. Sometimes the quieter pieces make the most decisive moves. A lesson not limited to chess, I suspect. He began resetting the board, his fingers moving with practiced precision. Your mother taught you well. Actually, it was my grandfather. He believed chess built character. Smart man. Edward paused, a pawn between his fingers. Speaking of smart people, the board approved your scholarship program this morning. Full funding for the next 5 years. Elodie's face brightened. That's wonderful. The rural students will have university opportunities they never dreamed possible. It was your presentation that convinced them, particularly the data on economic return when rural communities retain educated young people. He completed the board setup. You've developed quite a reputation in philanthropy circles these past months. Have I? Indeed, I've received calls from 3 other foundations asking if you might consult on their education initiatives. Pride warmed her cheeks. That's flattering, but I already have more than enough to do here. Edward studied her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beneath surfaces. You've accomplished more in 6 months than most directors achieve in years. The foundation is thriving under your leadership. Our leadership, she corrected gently. Your guidance has been invaluable. Perhaps initially, he acknowledged. But lately I find myself following your lead more often than not. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. You're not considering stepping back, are you? Not entirely, but I've been thinking it might be time to expand my horizons beyond these walls. His fingers absently traced the outline of a chess piece. Catherine always wanted to establish international partnerships, educational initiatives in developing nations, particularly focused on girls' access to technology. That sounds incredible. Elodie leaned forward, immediately energized by the possibility. We could start with pilot programs in countries where we already have connections through the university scholarship recipients. Edward's expression softened. There's that word again. We. Of course we. She met his gaze steadily. Unless you'd prefer to pursue this independently. No, he said quietly. I wouldn't. The air between them seemed to shift, charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Elodie looked down at the chessboard, suddenly conscious of her racing pulse. Another game? She offered, her voice carefully casual. Not tonight. Edward wheeled back, slightly creating distance. I have some reading to finish, but thank you, Elodie, for the game and for everything else. The following week brought the first quarterly impact assessment of the mobile library program. The data exceeded even their most optimistic projections, Book borrowing rates in participating communities had increased by 217%. Student reading scores were trending upward, and teacher feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The foundation board voted unanimously to fund 3 additional carriages by year's end. To celebrate, the staff organized a small gathering at the mansion. Priya, James and May arrived with champagne and catering from a local restaurant. Margaret, who had gradually warmed to Elodie's presence in Edward's life, joined them, bringing her rarely seen husband, Alan. Edward surprised everyone by appearing without prompting, socializing with genuine, if somewhat reserved, interest in each person's contribution to the foundation's success. As the evening progressed, Elodie noticed him engaging in an extended conversation with May about her background in community organizing, something the Edward she'd met 8 months ago would never have initiated. "He's different with you," Margaret observed quietly, joining Elodie by the windows overlooking the illuminated gardens. "I've worked for Mr. Langston for 12 years. Since Catherine died, I've never seen him voluntarily attend a social gathering, let alone engage this way." "The foundation's success is important to him," Elodie suggested. Margaret's knowing glance spoke volumes. "It's not just the foundation." Before Elodie could respond, James called for everyone's attention, raising his glass in a toast to the team's accomplishments. As speeches and appreciation flowed around the room, Elodie found her gaze drawn repeatedly to Edward, who watched the proceedings with a contentment she'd never before witnessed in him. When the gathering ended and the staff departed with warm goodbyes, Elodie lingered to help Margaret with the minimal cleanup. "You should get some rest," Edward said, approaching as she collected the last of the glasses. "Tomorrow's board presentation will be demanding." "I'm too energized to sleep," she admitted. "It's wonderful seeing everything come together this way. Then perhaps you'd join me for a nightcap on the veranda. The evening's quite mild." The veranda, with its comfortable seating and sweeping views of Port Phillip Bay in the distance, had become one of Elodie's favorite spots. Edward was already there when she arrived, having poured 2 small glasses of aged whiskey. "To successful beginnings," he offered, raising his glass. "And to continued progress," she added, savoring the smoky warmth as she sipped. For a time, they sat in comfortable silence, the gentle chorus of night insects providing a soothing backdrop. Stars scattered across the clear sky, and a nearly full moon cast silver light across the gardens. "I've been thinking," Edward said finally, "about what comes next." "For the foundation?" "For you." He turned to face her directly. "You've exceeded every expectation, Elodie. Created programs with meaningful impact, managed resources brilliantly, inspired the board and staff alike. Your talents deserve recognition beyond what my foundation alone can offer." A flutter of unease stirred in her chest. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "There's an opening for executive director at the National Literacy Council in Canberra. Prestigious position, significant influence on national education policy. The salary is nearly double what you're earning now." He hesitated. "I've recommended you for consideration." Elodie set down her glass carefully. "Without discussing it with me first? I wanted to ensure they would be interested before mentioning it." "They are extremely so. They've asked if you would interview next month." "Edward," she took a measured breath. "While I appreciate your confidence in me, I'm building something here. We're building something. Why would you want me to leave now?" His expression remained carefully neutral. "Because outstanding talent deserves the largest possible stage. Your vision for education could transform opportunities for thousands of children across Australia, not just in Victoria." "Is that the only reason?" Something flickered in his eyes, vulnerability quickly masked. "What other reason would there be?" Elodie studied him, reading the tension in his shoulders, the careful distance he maintained even as they sat side by side. "Perhaps you're growing too comfortable with my presence here. Perhaps it's easier to recommend me for advancement elsewhere than to acknowledge what's developing between us." Edward's fingers tightened around his glass. "Nothing is developing between us, Elodie. You're a valued colleague whose career I'm supporting, as any good mentor would." "A mentor doesn't watch his protege the way you watch me when you think I'm not looking," she said softly. "A mentor doesn't arrange his schedule to maximize time in her company. A mentor doesn't open his home and his life the way you have with me. You're imagining implications that don't exist," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Elodie leaned forward. "Edward, I respect you enormously, but I've never known you to be a coward." His head snapped up, blue eyes flashing. Caution isn't cowardice. You're young, brilliant, with unlimited potential. You're what? Older, in a wheelchair, still grieving Catherine. She shook her head. None of those things change who you are or what I see in you. Edward wheeled back slightly, creating physical distance. This conversation is inappropriate. I'm your employer. You're much more than that, whether you're ready to admit it or not. Elodie stood, gathering her composure. I won't be interviewing in Canberra. My work here isn't finished. When you're ready to be honest with yourself and with me about why you really want me to leave, we can continue this discussion. She left him there on the veranda, moonlight casting his solitary figure in silver and shadow. For the first time since coming to the Langston estate, Elodie felt tears burning behind her eyes, not from sadness but from frustration, at the walls he continued to maintain, even as every action betrayed the feelings he refused to acknowledge. 3 days passed with minimal interaction between them. Edward retreated into work, scheduling back-to-back meetings that conveniently coincided with Elodie's usual office hours. Their communication became strictly professional. Brief emails, messages relayed through Margaret, and one painfully formal video conference where neither mentioned their veranda conversation. On the 4th morning, Elodie arrived at her office to find an unmarked envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note in Edward's distinctive script. I owe you an apology, not for recommending you for a position you deserve, but for my inability to articulate my conflicted feelings. Would you join me for dinner this evening? Not in the dining room, but at Harbour Light. 7 p.m. Our car will be waiting if you accept. E.L. Harbour Light was Melbourne's most acclaimed restaurant, intimate, elegant, and nearly impossible to get reservations without weeks of advance notice. The invitation itself represented effort and planning that spoke volumes. Elodie stared at the note, tracing her finger over the precise penmanship. Part of her wanted to decline, to protect herself from further confusion, but the greater part, the part that recognized the courage this gesture required from a man who had isolated himself from emotional vulnerability for years, knew she would accept. At 6:30 that evening, she stood before her closet, surveying options with uncharacteristic indecision. She finally selected a simple emerald dress that Catherine's personal shopper had helped her choose. Months earlier for foundation events, its classic lines and rich color suited her without trying too hard, exactly the balance she sought for whatever conversation awaited. The promised car, Edward's personal vehicle, not a hired service, arrived precisely on time. To her surprise, Edward himself was inside rather than a driver. I thought we could have privacy during the journey, he explained as she settled into the passenger seat. The specially adapted controls allowed him to drive without assistance, a skill she knew he rarely exercised since Catherine's death. Neither spoke much during the drive. Elodie noticed Edward's hands gripping the steering wheel with subtle tension, his profile outlined against the city lights as they approached the harbour district. When they arrived, the maître d' greeted him by name. Clearly he had been here before, though not recently. Their table overlooked the water, city lights shimmering on its dark surface. A bottle of champagne waited in a silver bucket, and as they were seated, Elodie realized this particular table was specially designed to accommodate Edward's wheelchair comfortably, another detail he had arranged in advance. Thank you for coming, he said once they were alone. I wasn't certain you would. Honestly, I wasn't certain either, she admitted. These past few days have been difficult. For me as well. He poured champagne for them both, his movements precise. This restaurant was where Catherine and I celebrated our significant milestones, anniversaries, professional achievements, personal victories. He looked around briefly. I haven't been back since before her diagnosis. The significance of this choice of venue wasn't lost on Elodie. Why bring me here then? Because avoidance hasn't served me well. He met her gaze directly. After our conversation on the veranda, I realized how deeply I've entrenched myself in patterns of withdrawal. Catherine would have been disappointed in what I've become. I don't think she would, Elodie said gently. Grief doesn't have a timetable, Edward. Perhaps not, but there's a difference between honoring a loss and using it as a shield against living. He took a measured breath. You were right, Elodie. I recommended you for that position because I'm afraid of what's happening between us. The simple admission hung between them, neither celebration nor defeat but acknowledgement of a truth they had both recognized. And what exactly is happening? she asked quietly. "I find myself thinking of you constantly, arranging my day to intersect with yours, looking forward to our conversations, our chess matches, even our disagreements." His fingers tightened around the stem of his glass. "At first I told myself it was professional admiration, then that it was friendship. But it's grown beyond those boundaries, and that terrifies me." "Because of our working relationship?" "Partly. The foundation needs your leadership. I won't compromise that." He hesitated. "But primarily because I never expected to feel this way again. I'm 15 years older than you, physically limited, emotionally complicated. You deserve someone without my baggage." Elodie considered her response carefully. "Don't you think I should determine what I deserve, what I want?" "What do you want, Elodie?" "Honesty, respect, partnership." She held his gaze. "I want to continue building something meaningful through the foundation. And yes, I want to explore whatever this connection between us might become, without either of us sacrificing our professional integrity or rushing into territory neither is ready for." Relief visibly washed over him. "That's remarkably sensible." "Did you expect hysteria?" she asked with a hint of amusement. "I expected you to tell me I'm a fool for waiting this long to have this conversation." "Oh, you are," she assured him, smiling. "But I understand why." Their dinner proceeded with a new ease between them. They discussed foundation projects, books they'd recently read, memories of Dalesford, and tentative plans for expanding the mobile library program interstate. No grand declarations or dramatic gestures, just two people gradually dismantling the walls between them, brick by careful brick. As they drove back to the estate, Edward said, "I've withdrawn your name from consideration for the Canberra position. I apologize for overstepping." "Thank you, though I suspect they'll contact me directly now that they know I exist." "Undoubtedly. And when they do, I hope you'll consider it fairly, based on your own ambitions, not on other factors." "I will," she promised. "But my immediate goals remain here with the foundation." At the mansion, he walked her to her door, or rather, she walked while he wheeled alongside. The corridor was quiet, staff long since retired for the evening. "Thank you for tonight," she said as they reached her suite. "For your honesty. It's the least you deserve." He hesitated, then reached for her hand, his touch light but deliberate. "Good night, Elodie." "Good night, Edward." A simple exchange, yet weighted with new understanding. As her door closed between them, Elodie leaned against it, acknowledging to herself what she had barely dared consider these past months. She was falling in love with Edward Langston. The following weeks brought subtle but meaningful changes to their relationship. They maintained professional boundaries during foundation hours, but began spending evenings together, sometimes with staff or visitors present, increasingly often just the two of them. Their chess games continued, now accompanied by deeper conversations about their histories, beliefs, and dreams for the future. Edward gradually shared more about Catherine, not just her illness and death, but the vibrancy of her life, the strength of their partnership, the ways she had challenged and supported him. "She would have adored you," he told Elodie one evening as they reviewed architectural plans for a permanent literacy centre in Melbourne's western suburbs. "Your determination, your vision." She always said philanthropy needed fewer socialites and more revolutionaries. "I'm hardly a revolutionary," Elodie laughed. "You transformed from housekeeper to foundation director in less than a year, revitalized dormant programs, created innovative new ones, and challenged a reclusive billionaire to re-engage with the world." His eyes held warm appreciation. "If that's not revolutionary, I don't know what is." On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Edward suggested they visit the rose garden Catherine had designed at the rear of the property. Though he often drove his wheelchair through the broader grounds, Elodie realized he had never invited her to this particular spot before. The garden was spectacular, hundreds of varieties arranged in graceful patterns around a central fountain. Stone pathways wide enough for Edward's chair allowed access to every section, with benches positioned at strategic viewpoints. "She spent hours here," he explained as they paused beside a particularly vibrant display of yellow blooms. "Planning, planting, pruning," said it taught her. "Their patience and humility." "It's beautiful," Elodie murmured, "perfectly balanced between structure and wildness. Like Catherine herself." He smiled at a private memory. "When she became too ill to come outside, I would bring fresh cuttings to her room each morning. The day she died, these yellow roses were blooming beside her bed. Elodie reached for his hand, offering silent support as he shared this intimate detail. His fingers intertwined with hers, warm and certain. "I avoided this garden for years," he continued. "Couldn't bear to see it without her. Margaret kept it maintained, but I never came here. Why bring me here now?" His blue eyes, clearer than she'd ever seen them, met hers directly. "Because healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about finding the courage to build a future that honors it while embracing new possibilities." He squeezed her hand gently. "You've helped me understand that, Elodie." A month after their dinner at Harbour Light, Edward received an invitation to speak at a global education summit in Sydney. After initial hesitation, he agreed, on the condition that Elodie present alongside him about the mobile library program. "It's time the world sees what we've accomplished," he said, "and perhaps time I step beyond Melbourne's boundaries again." The preparation for their joint presentation brought them together daily, reviewing data, refining slides, practicing delivery. Edward, despite his years away from public speaking, possessed a natural authority that complemented Elodie's passionate articulation of their mission. The night before, they were to leave for Sydney. Edward invited Elodie to the library for what she assumed would be a final review of their materials. Instead, she found the chess table set up, a small velvet box positioned beside the White King. "What's this?" she asked, heart suddenly racing. "Not what you might think," he said quickly, noticing her expression. "Please sit." Inside the box was an antique silver locket, intricately engraved with roses similar to those in Catherine's garden. "This belonged to my grandmother, then my mother, then Catherine," Edward explained. "Each woman who wore it was a force for positive change in her community. My grandmother established scholarships for women in science. My mother created Melbourne's first crisis centre for families experiencing domestic violence. And Catherine, as you know, championed education." He lifted the locket carefully. "I'd like you to have it, Elodie. Not as a romantic gesture, we're still finding our way there, but as recognition of your place in this continuum of remarkable women whose work has changed lives." Elodie felt tears welling. "Edward, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept it. Wear it tomorrow when we present our work to the world." She nodded, turning so he could fasten the chain around her neck. The locket rested just below her collarbone, its weight light but significant. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting me with this history." "Thank you," he replied, "for helping me build its future." Sydney's International Convention Centre bustled with educators, philanthropists, and policymakers from around the world. Elodie and Edward navigated the crowded registration area, drawing curious glances, partly because of Edward's wheelchair, but primarily because his name badge identified him as the reclusive billionaire whose return to public philanthropy had been making headlines. "Are you nervous?" Elodie asked as they collected their presentation materials. "Strangely, no." Edward adjusted his tie. "When you believe in your message, delivery becomes secondary, and I believe in what we're doing." Their presentation was scheduled for the second day of the conference, allowing them time to attend other sessions and network with potential partners. Edward surprised Elodie with his willingness to engage, asking insightful questions during panels and exchanging contact information with foundation directors from New Zealand, Singapore, and South Africa. "You're a natural at this," she commented, as they reviewed their notes over dinner in the hotel restaurant. "Hard to believe you've been a hermit for 5 years." He smiled wryly. "I wasn't always antisocial. Before Catherine's illness, we travelled extensively for the foundation. I've simply been dormant, I suppose." "Well, you've certainly reawakened." She touched the locket at her throat, which had already drawn admiring comments from several attendees. "I'm proud to be here with you." The following morning, their presentation, "Mobile Libraries Bridging Educational Divides in Rural Australia," attracted a standing-room-only audience. Edward began with compelling statistics on literacy gaps between urban and rural communities, then smoothly transitioned to Elodie, who detailed their innovative solution. As she spoke, showcasing photos and impact data from the first 6 months of operation, Elodie felt a surge of pride, not just in the program's success, but in the partnership that had created it. She glanced at Edward seated beside the podium and found him watching her with unconcealed admiration. The question-and-answer session that followed was lively and engaged. When asked about expansion plans, Edward revealed their vision for similar programs in neighboring countries. The Langston Foundation is actively seeking international partners, he announced. Ms. Barnes and I will be visiting New Zealand and Indonesia in the coming months to explore potential collaborations. This was news to Elodie, but she seamlessly incorporated it into her responses, recognizing the strategic value of such partnerships. As the session concluded to enthusiastic applause, a distinguished woman approached them, Dr. Eleanor Watts, Australian Minister for Education. "Remarkable work," she said, shaking their hands. "I'd like to discuss potential government partnership to scale this model nationally. Are you available for lunch?" Over a 3-hour lunch that extended into afternoon tea, they outlined a framework for collaboration that would dramatically expand their impact. By the time they returned to the conference, word had spread about the government's interest, attracting additional foundation representatives eager to join the initiative. "I feel like we've started a movement," Elodie marveled as they finally retreated to the relative quiet of a small garden area outside the convention center. "This morning we were showcasing a regional program. Now we're discussing national implementation." "That's how change happens," Edward replied. "The right idea at the right time presented to the right people." He paused, studying her animated expression. "You were magnificent today." "You know that, don't you?" "We were magnificent," she corrected. "It's our vision, remember?" That evening they celebrated with dinner at Sydney's famous Opera House restaurant, the harbour bridge illuminated against the night sky beyond their window. Edward had arranged a private table with spectacular views and champagne waiting on arrival. "To new horizons," he toasted, glasses clinking softly between them. "Speaking of which," Elodie said, "New Zealand and Indonesia. Were you planning to mention those trips to me before announcing them to hundreds of people?" He had the grace to look sheepish. "I received the invitations yesterday and was waiting for the right moment to discuss them with you. Then the question arose and it seemed the perfect opportunity to commit us both." "Rather presumptuous, don't you think?" "Entirely," he admitted, "though you handled it brilliantly. Will you forgive my impulsiveness?" Her mock severity dissolved into a smile. "I suppose. The partnerships do make strategic sense." "They do," he agreed. "But there's another reason I want us to travel together." His expression grew more serious. "These past months we've been exploring our connection within the safe boundaries of the estate and foundation. I'd like to discover who we are together in wider contexts." The implication was clear. He was ready to define their relationship beyond professional collaboration, beyond tentative friendship. The thought both thrilled and unnerved her. "Are you suggesting these trips would be partially personal?" she asked carefully. "I'm suggesting they would be an opportunity to share experiences beyond work. Museums, local cuisine, cultural sites." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "No pressure or expectations, Elodie. Just two people learning more about each other outside the roles we've established at home." Home. The word resonated. The Langston estate had indeed become home to her, in ways her small apartment in Melbourne never had. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Very much." Their return to Melbourne brought immediate momentum from the Sydney conference. Minister Watts's office requested comprehensive documentation of their program methodology. 3 major foundations committed initial funding for international expansion. Most significantly, a national television program requested an in-depth feature on the mobile libraries, including interviews with both Edward and Elodie. "They want to film at the estate," Margaret reported, reviewing the producer's email. "Background on the foundation's history, your partnership, the development process. They're particularly interested in your personal journey, Mr. Langston. From tech innovator to recluse to philanthropic leader." Edward frowned. "I'm not comfortable with that level of personal exposure. It would significantly advance our cause," Elodie pointed out gently. "Public engagement translates to broader support. They'll want to discuss Catherine." "Yes, they probably will." He was quiet for a long moment. "Would you be there? During my interview portion, I mean." "Of course," she promised. "Whatever you need." The filming day arrived. With perfect autumn weather, the production team set up in various locations around the estate: the library, Elodie's office, the gardens, and finally, at Edward's insistence, Catherine's rose garden. Elodie watched from behind the cameras as Edward spoke about his late wife with a calm dignity that brought tears to the interviewer's eyes. He credited Catherine with the foundation's founding, principles, described her passion for education, and acknowledged the period of withdrawal following her death. "What brought you back to public engagement?" the interviewer asked. Edward's gaze found Elodie beyond the cameras. "Someone reminded me that meaningful work doesn't end with personal loss. Someone showed me that Catherine's vision could live on through new initiatives, new partnerships." "You're referring to Elodie Barnes, your foundation director?" "Yes." His voice carried absolute certainty. "Ms. Barnes embodies the values this foundation was built upon: integrity, compassion, vision. She transformed not just our programs, but my understanding of what's possible when you trust the right person." Later, when they filmed the segment on their partnership, the interviewer noted the silver locket Elodie wore. "This was given to me recently," she explained, touching it lightly. "It represents a legacy of women committed to positive change, a tradition I'm honored to continue through our work." "A family heirloom?" the interviewer probed. Edward answered before Elodie could formulate a response. "Yes," he said simply, "a family tradition." That evening, after the crew had departed, they sat together in the library reviewing the day. "You called the locket a family tradition," Elodie said carefully. "The interviewer will interpret that a certain way." "I know." Edward's eyes held hers steadily. "Does that concern you?" "It depends on your intention." He wheeled closer, taking her hands in his. "My intention, Elodie Barnes, is to continue, discovering who we are together, not just as colleagues or friends, but as two people building something neither expected to find." "And what is that exactly?" "Partnership, trust, perhaps love, if we're brave enough to name it." His voice dropped slightly on the last word, vulnerable yet certain. Elodie felt her heart racing. "Are we? Brave enough, I mean." "I'm trying to be," he admitted. "After hiding from life for so long, courage comes in small steps. But I know this. You've awakened possibilities I thought were forever closed to me." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "Then, let's be brave together." His hand gently cupped her cheek, and when their lips met, it felt like a beginning, tender, unhurried, full of promise. The New Zealand and Indonesia trips proved transformative, both for the foundation and for Edward and Elodie's relationship. In Auckland, they established partnerships with indigenous Maori educators, adapting their mobile library model to serve remote island communities. In Jakarta, they collaborated with tech companies to incorporate digital literacy tools specifically designed for children with limited internet access. Traveling together revealed new dimensions of their connection. Away from the structured environment of the estate, they discovered shared interests in local cuisine, historical architecture, and impromptu conversations with strangers. Edward, once so guarded, found himself enjoying these new experiences through Elodie's enthusiastic perspective. "You've gotten quite good at this," she observed one evening. As they dined at a small restaurant in Bali, their final stop before returning to Australia. "At what exactly?" he asked, sampling the spicy seafood dish before them. "Being in the world again." She gestured to the busy restaurant, the lively street beyond. 6 months ago, you wouldn't have considered sitting in a place like this, surrounded by people, enjoying yourself. He considered this, then nodded slowly. "It's easier with the right companion." The warmth in his eyes made her heart flutter. Even now, after weeks of growing closeness. Their relationship had evolved naturally during their travels, shared hotel suites with separate bedrooms, gradually giving way to more intimate arrangements, physical boundaries dissolving as emotional connection deepened. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "That I never expected this when I applied for a housekeeper position," she admitted with a smile. "Life takes such unexpected turns." "Indeed it does." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Speaking of turns, there's something I'd like to discuss before we return home." Elodie felt a flutter of anticipation. "I'm listening." "The television feature has generated extraordinary response. The Minister's office has formally proposed a national expansion of our program. 3 international organizations have requested our consulting services." He paused. "The foundation is growing beyond what we initially envisioned." "That's wonderful," she said, though she sensed more coming. "It is, but it raises questions about structure and leadership." His fingers tightened slightly around hers. "I'd like to create 2 distinct divisions: domestic programs, which you would continue directing, and international initiatives, which I would lead. Co-equal branches, reporting to a shared board. Elodie considered this carefully. That makes organizational sense, but is there another reason for this restructuring? Edward's expression softened. Yes, I want to eliminate any perception of power imbalance between us. As things stand, you technically report to me, which complicates our personal relationship. This new structure would make us equals professionally. You've given this considerable thought. I have. His blue eyes held hers steadily. I don't want anything. Organizational charts, public perception, or traditional hierarchies to constrain what's developing between us. She smiled, squeezing his hand. Then I fully support the restructuring. They returned to Melbourne to find spring transforming the estate gardens. Catherine's roses were in magnificent bloom, their fragrance filling the morning air as Elodie and Edward presented the restructuring plan to the foundation board. The proposal was approved, unanimously, with an official announcement scheduled for the following month. That evening, Edward invited Elodie to join him in the rose garden. The setting sun bathed the flowers in golden light as they followed the stone pathway to a small pavilion at the garden center, Catherine's favorite spot for morning reflection. I have something to show you, Edward said, retrieving a manila envelope from his wheelchair compartment. The property deed for Barnes and Daughters. Elodie took it, puzzled. Why do you have this? Open it, he encouraged gently. Inside, she found legal documents transferring full ownership of the bookshop building to her mother, with no liens or encumbrances. Edward, what have you done? The foundation's grant was always meant to be temporary support. This ensures your family's legacy permanently. He smiled at her astonishment. Your mother knows the paperwork was finalized last week. Tears welled in Elodie's eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Your mother built something beautiful there, just as you're building something beautiful here. She knelt beside his wheelchair, eye to eye with him. Thank you. Not just for this, but for everything these past months have brought into my life. I'm the one who should be thanking you, Elodie. His voice grew serious. When you first came here, I was existing, not living, surrounded by wealth, but impoverished in spirit. And now I understand what Catherine tried to tell me before she died, that life's greatest treasures aren't kept in safes. He took her hands in his. They're found in integrity, in purpose, in connection. The parallel to their first meaningful interaction, the open safe, her choice, his test, wasn't lost on either of them. Full circle, Elodie thought, from strangers to partners, from employer and employee to equals in every sense. I love you, she said simply, the words feeling natural and right. And I love you, he replied, his voice steady, with certainty, more than I thought possible again. 1 year to the day after Elodie first arrived at the Langston estate, they gathered with close friends and family in Catherine's rose garden for an intimate ceremony. Olivia Barnes, elegant in navy blue, sat beside Margaret Chen in the front row. Priya, James and May arranged final details with quiet efficiency. Dr. Eleanor Watts had flown in from Canberra, along with partners from their international initiatives. Edward waited beneath a trellis of climbing yellow roses, his wheelchair positioned so the setting sun illuminated his face. When Elodie appeared at the garden entrance, his expression of wonder and love made her heart swell. She walked the stone path toward him, wearing a simple cream dress and Catherine's silver locket. No elaborate procession, no traditional fanfare, just a woman moving with purpose toward the future she had chosen. The celebrant, a longtime friend of the Barnes family, spoke of unexpected beginnings and second chances, of integrity tested and proven, of partnerships built on mutual respect and shared vision. Edward and Elodie have chosen to write their own vows, she announced, stepping back to give them this moment. Edward took Elodie's hands, his voice clear and steady. 1 year ago, I left a safe open, a test born of distrust and past wounds. What I didn't expect was how your response would change everything. He smiled at the echo of their stories beginning. You showed me that integrity isn't just about doing right when someone is watching, but about who you are in your deepest self. You reminded me what it means to believe in someone completely, what it means to feel again after I thought that capacity was lost to me forever. He continued, his thumbs gently caressing her wrists. I promise to honor your independence while standing beside you in partnership, to support your dreams as fervently as you've supported mine, to build with you a life where trust is never tested, only treasured. Elodie's eyes shimmered with tears as she spoke her vows. When I came here, I was looking for security, a way to save what mattered to my family. What I found instead was a new beginning, not just for them, but for me. Her voice grew stronger with each word. You saw beyond surfaces to possibilities in me and in yourself. You taught me that healing isn't about forgetting the past, but finding the courage to build a future that honors it. She squeezed his hands gently. I promise to walk beside you in all seasons, to face challenges with the same integrity that brought us together, to cherish the rare gift of second chances, and to remind you whenever doubts arise that love doesn't diminish with sharing, it multiplies. The exchange of rings, his mother's band for Elodie, a custom designed for Edward that accommodated his active hands, was followed by a simple pronouncement. No dramatic kiss, just foreheads touching in quiet acknowledgement of the journey completed and the one beginning. The celebration afterward was as understated as the ceremony. Dinner in the garden, toasts from close friends, music playing softly as evening stars appeared above them. Edward and Elodie moved among their guests, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder as he navigated his wheelchair through the gathering. Olivia found them near the fountain, stepping aside briefly for a private moment with her daughter. He's a good man, she said softly. I wasn't certain at first, but I am now. He is, Elodie agreed. We both got second chances, Mum. The shop is thriving, you. Hanno, our community programs have waiting lists now. Olivia smiled. But what matters most is seeing you like this. Purposeful, respected, loved. Later, as the celebration wound down, Edward and Elodie found themselves alone in the pavilion, watching moonlight silver the roses. He pulled her gently onto his lap, her head resting against his shoulder. Happy? He asked, his breath warm against her. Hair. Completely. She traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers, though I'm still processing how much has changed in a year. Some things haven't changed, he reminded her. Your integrity, my stubbornness. She laughed softly. True enough. The Foundation Board approved our expansion proposal this morning, he mentioned. 10 more mobile libraries across Australia by year's end. International pilot programs in 5 countries. Always working, even on our wedding day? Not working, he corrected. Sharing good news with my partner, in all things. The distinction mattered. Their professional collaboration had always been intertwined with their personal connection, each strengthening the other. Where shall we go next? She asked, not referring to geographic destinations, but to life's journey. Wherever there's need we can meet, challenges we can face together. His arms tightened around her. The beauty of this partnership is that home isn't a place anymore. It's wherever we stand side by side. Elodie thought of the winding path that had brought her here, from desperate job applicant to foundation director to equal partner in both work and life, from a woman trying to save her family's past to one building a future bigger than she'd ever imagined. Do you ever think about that morning? She asked. The open safe? Often, he admitted. How different everything would be if you'd made another choice. There was never another choice to make, she said simply. Not really. We are who we are at our core. That's what you were testing, wasn't it? Yes, and you passed beyond my wildest expectations. He kissed her softly. Though I've learned since then that the greatest test isn't a single moment of integrity, but the courage to keep your heart open, day after day. As the moon rose higher, casting its gentle light over Catherine's roses, they remained together in the pavilion, 2 people who had found in each other not just love, but renewal. The safe that had once stood as a symbol of temptation and test had become merely part of their story, a beginning, not a definition. We should join our guests, Elodie suggested eventually. In a moment, Edward replied, his voice reflective. I want to remember this exactly. How the moonlight looks on your face, how it feels to begin again. She leaned down to kiss him, understanding perfectly. For both of them, this wasn't just a wedding day, but a testament to life's unexpected gifts, to second chances, to trust rewarded, to the quiet power of doing right when no one is watching, to integrity, the foundation upon which they had built everything else. Ready? She asked finally, rising from his lap. With you? Edward took her hand, his eyes reflecting starlight and certainty. Always. Together they returned to the gathering, to the future they would continue building, choice by choice, day by day. Not a test anymore, but a journey. not employer and employee, but partners in the truest sense. And as they rejoined their loved ones beneath the garden lights, Elodie touched the silver locket at her throat, a symbol of legacy continued, of values passed forward, of the unexpected. Ways life creates exactly the connections we need, precisely when we need them most.